Well, hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'd like to share with you a little story around sanding parts for my car. For those of you who might have already had a chance to watch, I've been building up a Fiesta RS style spoiler. It's been largely a manual process, and I want to invest in some slightly better equipment. So here's a lovely orbital sander. As you can see from the promotional pictures, it claims to have a fantastic internal airflow and a, well, rather modest collector bag for all the dust as you're using it. So clearly, only 30 quid seems like a reasonable buy, and from all the promotional materials, everyone seems to be having a lovely time using it. Nothing to worry about there, surely. So, getting rather excited at this point, and further confidence being built by the happy people in the photos, I've added to the basket, and it's on its way to me in the post. So here is my lovely orbital sander, 5-inch sanding discs, putting it to good use on that lower spoiler you may have seen in the previous episodes, and the end plates. Now it's time to back the car out of the garage just to push a hoover around and have a little look at what's going on. Awakening from his slumber, the beast is sounding good, so let's take a little look at the bodywork. Obviously the back of the car has been used as a bit of a design mule, but hang on a second, it seems to be covered in a film of rather unsightly dust, so if you run over to it very excitedly with a camera, you can really see that on the top surface. Unfortunately, in the box, there is no means of connecting this to a hoover. So I think this is where having a 3D printer will come into its own. So the first step, I pulled off the relevant engineering interfaces. What you can see here is the female side of the connection to the sander and the male side of a well-known Dyson vacuum cleaner I have lying around in the garage. So here's the design principle I'm going for. So I'd like to create a hollow cylinder to connect up to the Dyson and a socket type interface to push onto the sander itself. Now obviously getting a ruler out and doing some initial measurements, I think I probably need at least a 36mm male interface to allow that flow and then put a nice fillet on there to manage the stress back onto the base. So looking at it from the other side, I've got a slightly curved upper and lower surface which I'll need to manage and get some very accurate measurements to get a good snug fit. So I've got my male, my female interface, plugging the Dyson into the sander. So the next step that I really enjoy is then trying to CAD that up. The whole process took me about 2 hours to make the part, but I thought I'd just show you a quick demonstration of the principles. Create a sketch with a circle. So in this case, I believe it was around a 34mm diameter, so I've gone for that. The next step is to try and create an offset plane. So let's come out of this view and then select the XY plane, insert a datum some distance away from that to allow you to offset a sketch. So select the XY, pop in a distance, let's go with 36mm because we measured that one up earlier. And once that's done, you can then select the plane and put a sketch onto it. So the clever thing about this software is by creating two shapes, for example a rectangle and a circle, you can join the two up in 3D with a lovely smooth aerodynamic looking connection. So let's size that up, roughly 45mm in width and height probably 20-25mm there or thereabouts. Lovely. And I'm just going to eyeball it for these purposes. We're not going to sort of set a connection back up to the origin or the XY axis. That's good enough for this. Let's hide the unsightly plane because no one wants to look at reference geometry. And there you go. You've got two sketches floating in 3D space. So the next challenge is how to connect them. There's something called an additive loft in FreeCAD. So you select the sketches you'd like to use. Then you click on additive loft. Et voila! You have an absolute engineering masterpiece at your fingertips. Obviously that's not the finished part, that's just the connection and how you might manage the interface. So let's grow out a bit of a pad, so select that face, click on pad and give it a nice 10mm extrusion. Fantastic. Let's do the same thing on the other side. I remember it was 36mm we were aiming for, there or thereabouts, so it would interface nicely with a vacuum cleaner. There we go, so just going to type in the reference geometry there. Just eyeballing it, it looks maybe like that transition between the circle and the rectangle is a bit long. I don't want this thing to be enormous and to have really high stresses in from bending, so I'm going to shrink that one down, maybe 20-25mm feels about right. Update the part, there we go. What we're going to do, obviously this is a solid part, is load it into the slicer and turn it into a tube. Here's the part loaded into the Creality slicer that comes free with a 3D printer. What this does is allow you to slice the part up into vertical pieces, which then can be printed out one layer at a time. So what we're going to do is look at the slicer options and the shell itself. I think we want to aim for something about 2mm thick. That works out at about 5 lines of 0.4mm. Make sure that there's no top and bottom thickness, so it's hollow. And then we're just going to make sure there isn't any infill. So obviously that's the grid-like structure that would normally fill out a shape to make it rigid. We then click on Slice, and you can preview what you've created. So looking at it from above, you can actually play the print head trajectory, so you can see how it's tracing around the circumference of the tube. Interestingly, there's a little step as it gets to the end of each section, and that produces a little bit of a seam, and if you're super keen you can try and manage those things or even have one continuous print. But for the purposes of a vacuum cleaner attachment, I think we'll probably be okay. So here we are, back in the man cave. The green LED is on and it's looking pretty sci-fi. Obviously the Ender 3 is printing very nicely with the PLA material that I've chosen, and the part just coming to a finish there on the heated bed. Now, breaking it away, let's take a closer look. Now this thing is pretty chunky. It's nice and solid, seems quite durable, feels really good in the hand, which is always a good sign. So let's try and put this thing together. So there's the Hoover interface, and then we're going to push that onto the part, which is almost impossible one-handed. But by the powers of video editing, it's done. So now we're going to offer it up to the sander, nice and snug. I think I wouldn't mind adding a little bit of duct tape or something just to wrap around to give it the perfect sealing that I'd love to have. But actually, that's adequately fit for purpose for what I want to do. So let's do a gratuitous flyover of the new setup. So obviously now I've got my extendable hose coming off the Dyson on the floor, connected back up to the table onto my sander to collect all the dust as I'm making it while producing parts for the car. So in review, I'm pretty pleased with how the part turned out versus the sketch. I think using a 3D printer is something I need to do a bit more often, and hopefully keep my car clean too. Thanks for watching, guys. For now, engineer out.